This is Brett Hudson with Access Space. You're watching Tech Talk. Make sure that you spread the word, share with your friends, and share the vision.
Thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us. One of the things that I have recognized in looking at some of the work that you've done, that there are two main areas of interest: your entrepreneurial ecosystem development, as well as the technology for civic and social engagement. And I want us to delve into those areas throughout this interview. But before we do, can you tell us a little bit about what are some of the work that you've done and kind of your history prior to coming to Miami to work with the Knight Foundation?
Sure, and certainly, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. It's my pleasure, my honor. So I'm originally from Phoenix, Arizona. Grew up there. Attended Stanford University. Got my honors degree in public policy. Since then, I've always been heavily involved in the startup community, mostly focused on technology and startups that have some sort of element of civic engagement. So it's actually been an ongoing thing. It came to the Knight Foundation through, I actually worked with a Knight-funded startup back in Phoenix. Came to the Knight Foundation for the Tech for Engagement Program Initiative through the National Urban Fellows Program. Since then, I was given an offer, was a strategy consultant to the Knight Foundation for the Tech for Engagement Initiative. This is at the same time, we are exploring ways to broaden civic engagement through space, co-working spaces in particular. And the lab was funded through the Miami Program Initiative, Matt Hagman. And from there, from the Knight Foundation, got involved with the lab, with the idea that this whole idea of co-working space could be enhanced through exploring ways that you can leverage your own personal networks, leverage the community, build more networks, not just offer reduced price space for entrepreneurs, but really be purposeful around building the civic side of the community and providing greater access and networks for those individuals while focusing on building ideas and helping those entrepreneurs.
Describe for us the dynamics, the space, and then the end goal that you have for a co-working space.
Certainly. So typically, co-working space is sort of a relatively new concept where you have more and more freelancers, more and more entrepreneurs brought on, I think, by the transition into the information age. That once it's the costs are coming down to start your own venture, to not necessarily have to work for a large corporation. To be a freelancer or entrepreneur, as those costs come down, more and more people are engaging in this whole field, and they need places to work. There are coffee shops, there are you can work from home, but the spaces that really, I think, encourage people to work together, to engage together, and those are the places that entrepreneurs and like-minded people really want to see, the creative type. And so, building on the whole concept of co-working, this reduced price office space. We're seeing that adding the element of collaboration, of connections, really building sort of a collaborative atmosphere across these different fields, different sectors, not having a particular focus, whether it's artists or coders or musicians. What you're finding is that a lot of these people cross-pollinate across, their ideas, their projects, their ventures, and new, entirely creative things are coming out of that. And so, it's the collaborative space is sort of the way that I see it, and it's the step beyond just, traditional co-working.
It sounds as if the Knight Foundation had already had an investment in producing and creating this co-working space. So when you were brought on, you didn't have to pitch this idea to them, did you?
Well, initially when I started the Knight Foundation, it actually was a very new concept. Mm-hmm. I wrote my master's thesis around the idea that cities could design themselves for disruptive innovation. Designing for disruption is what I called it, and how they can build in, leverage tech networks and co-working spaces to actually build civic engagement and entrepreneurship.
You had then moved from the Knight Foundation to Lab Miami. Talk with me about Lab Miami and how did that transition you from
Sure.
Lab Miami to Access Space?
The Knight Foundation is very, passionate about, gathering data and evidence for the impact that it's having. And built into this whole concept, I think that there's the potential to really build data, some sort of analytics around what the impact of this engagement is. So I had approached Wilfredo Fernandez, the CEO, and one of the co-founders of the lab after it was funded around this idea of, hey, maybe we can, through the business model, actually incorporate a lot of these analytics and expand our reach, demonstrate our impact, and really, I think, for the first time, have strong evidence around what civic engagement actually is, from a human capital standpoint, from building analytics around how people are engaging, what people are learning, all of these things that are not really well understood, but we could actually make some sort of impact in trying to understand what that looks like. So he loved the idea, and I came on board.
You talked about using data, doing the analytics, but then it's the application. To be able to look at how cities are able to use that to really, so this is where the merging of the technology as well as civically, what is it that we need and how do we then build and meet those needs?
Correct, and I think that cities are certainly looking at a lot of these areas, around what does it actually mean to have data around a lot of these things, and what does that mean for economic development? And it's still not very well understood. There's the whole smart city movement going on right now, which is looking at how technology startups really can have an impact on the civic infrastructure. And the lifeblood of these startups really is data, that they need to be able to demonstrate, their own impact so that they can grow their business, but also at the same time that data provides information for the city as well, in real time. And perhaps that there's a way that we can actually create sort of this information feedback loop through a lot of these tech startups, and how they're engaging with their customers, their end users, which are also citizens and inhabitants of the city. And in turn, this creates an ecosystem of information and how people are engaging, how people are building new startups, everything that goes along with a well-functioning city.
So what are the end goal? What are the measurables? What are the deliverables that you, in saying, okay, I've done a successful co-working space that's achieved all of this? What does that look like? What would that look like for you?
I think that would vary, from co-working space to co-working space, but I look at them really as a tool for economic development. I think that building a cohesive community that of individual startups, people with good ideas that come from a cross section of many different fields. Again, whether it's the creative side or the more tech focused side, and different diverse groups of people working together from all cross sections of the city. I think that would be the ideal entrepreneurial community. And the way that I look at it, what the ideal is a cohesive community around different ideas that are, while working sort of on their own path, also working together.
We're currently in the Access Space here in Fort Lauderdale, and it's a new space you're getting ready to launch in the fall. When you take a look at the placement of this space and or Lab Miami, kind of right in the midst of a lot of the arts, the business and commerce areas, it's hard not to see their connection, how close they are to some of the other communities. Here in Fort Lauderdale, this is going to be pretty much a stone throw to Sistrunk Boulevard, just like Wynwood was right there next to Overtown. Mm-hmm. How is some of we talk about civic engagement, how are some of these communities of color predominantly really being brought into these spaces to be able to access, to benefit, to learn, to be able to take action?
I think that if you think of these co-working spaces more of as a community center that happens to have entrepreneurs working in it, that gives, I guess, sort of a better sense of what they actually are. Educational program activities are really, I think, one of the key pieces to really engage the broader community. That oftentimes people from different networks may not actually have interacted with these concepts, these spaces, and don't really have an idea of how they work. And so part of the goal, the mission of spaces like these, like Access Space, like Lab Miami, is to create content, create programmatic activity, create educational opportunities that reach more and more people. We're going to host programs around, what it means to be, the whole maker movement that's going on, 3D printing, wearable technologies, and teaching people around that, trying to get into the public schools, bring a lot of these ideas there. The lab is doing a fantastic job with the Wynwood Maker Camp, which is reaching more and more kids from a diverse cross-section. But really, I mean, I think a lot of this is very much in the experimental phase. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of it's not really well understood yet. But I think as time goes on and we have more and more people interacting with the space and coming in and seeing all the different ways that they can interact, what the opportunities are for them to learn, to create new ideas, to build new startups, then we'll have a better sense of what that actually looks like.
And so it sounds to me then that your marketing in terms of your target audience for both utilization of the space as well as to be able to be benefactors of those who are using the space to be able to give back to the community, that's going to look very different than your traditional, how we're going to go out and market it.
Certainly. I think that the way that we look at a lot of our marketing are the activities that we put on. It's not necessarily going out and just advertising to entrepreneurs. It's around demonstrating what community engagement actually is.
Are there any major tech businesses that you've seen that have chosen to collaborate or have moved forward in terms of the work that they're doing when they've worked together here in the space, whether it be when you were at Lab and what the hope is here for Access Space? Have you seen any of that happen as yet?
The cross-pollination of ideas all the time. That's specific examples. I mean, that ranges from somebody just helping out another startup with a particular skill set to actually building a new project or idea or product. That I think is what you see out of these co-working spaces. There's I mean, with the community itself, the building of the community. I mean, a lot of people were not at least entrepreneurs from the tech side, were not familiar with Wynwood before the lab, and we're trying to do the same here in Access Space along the Riverwalk. The community itself, I mean, the building collaborations between the city, between these entrepreneurs, between people with creative ideas and building something greater is truly what it's all about.
I could see it, hear it. It's what you live, it's what you breathe. What's the thing that wakes you up in the morning? What's your sweet spot? What's the thing that says, yes, I can keep doing this?
I think it's interacting with like-minded, very intelligent individuals who have sort of a bigger picture type of mindset. I mean, I think that would get anybody up and going. The ability to, and the honor to work with a lot of these individuals that have, I think, fantastic ideas around, social progress, city development, entrepreneurship, and having the ability to help them and impact what they're doing and help network them and grow their ideas. That I couldn't have a better position.
Talk with me a little bit about Smart City Startup. I know there's a huge conference that's coming next year in Miami. I know you're a part of, I think, the advisory board with the Urban Us. Talk with me a little bit about that project.
Certainly. There was just a conference back in April as well, the first Smart City Startup event hosted by Urban.us in Wynwood, and there will be another one in 2015 as well. Smart city startups, I mean, the whole idea is that it's very difficult for startups to work on issues not necessarily with government, but governance. How do we create better systems of energy, education, healthcare? Typically the things that the types of ideas and sectors that have a large public sector footprint in them, but are not necessarily exclusive to the government, right? And so how do we build better systems of governance by allowing people with new ideas, startups, entrepreneurs to engage with a lot of these sectors that they typically have not really in the past engaged with. And so Urban.us is a network of individuals that are thinking about this, whether it's investors, governments, startups, or people just that are urban leaders, thinking about ways and actually delivering actionable ways for a lot of these startups to interact with I guess, spheres that have typically only been government dominated. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. It does. And can you give me an example, just so that people can see what that would look like? Are you any that comes to mind that has already happened or that has been approved under this? Someone that might have been gotten funding.
Certainly. I mean, there are a number of startups that have been working in the smart city space for some time. I mean, C-Click-Fix, Ben Berkowitz is sort of a classic example. The pothole apps, where you take a picture of a pothole and it sends the information to government, and it allows, and the government has to respond by fixing it, and allows citizens to interact with their government in a new way. That's sort of the classic example, but I think as the space develops, you're going to see more and more startups that with creative ideas impacting governance. Another example is Neighborly, which is even beyond a civic crowdfunding platform. It's looking at different ways that citizens can directly invest into their local area, their city, their government, public parks, perhaps new educational opportunities, things like that. So that will also open up different ways for citizens to increase their levels of engagement and interact with their communities.
What are some of the challenges that you're seeing in terms of engagement and getting communities, and I want to specifically look at communities of color, to engage? We talk about everything from apathy to feeling that my voice doesn't count, it doesn't matter. Yet when we talk about communities of color, we know we are huge consumers of technology. Mm-hmm. How do we then, how is that? Tell me, how do we bridge that divide between being a consumer to how you could use it for civic engagement and to promote entrepreneurship?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. I don't know that there is a simple silver bullet solution. Communities of color are large consumers of technology, but I think that we need to really start analyzing ways that we can also be producers, and really highlighting individuals that are doing that and elevating them. Because a lot of times, I think what happens is that people who are looking at, let's take smart cities, that people who are developing a lot of these technologies don't really have a hand or an understanding in the community itself that they're building the technologies for. And it's difficult for those types of technologies to scale and build business if there's not an understanding of the end user. And so part of the solution has to be equipping people with the skill sets to be able to build their own solutions towards community challenges. And I think from there, those are scalable because there's a deep understanding of why the technology is being built in the first place, how to reach customers, how to iterate the process so that you're able to scale your idea, business, or product. But I think it all starts with education. I think that it all starts with equipping people with the skill sets and tools to build their own ideas, to build their own projects, and to build up their own communities.
And I think part of what I'm hearing you say also is that when people recognize that I may have a particular skill set, I may have that piece, I may have an idea, I understand innovation, but I just need that help for this next step. There's that piece that I don't know how to do or what to do with it. So instead of sitting on that idea, I could look at things like a Lab Miami or an Access Space and, oh, wait a minute, now I can access other experts in their fields, other subject matter experts that can help me to build and to create, and then to possibly get funding through a crowdfunding, right, like Neighborly?
So, certainly. I think that's the core concept, and sort of to wrap everything back around, absolutely. I think that is the role of co-working spaces, is to be sort of that community center, and to cross-pollinate not only different ideas, but people from different backgrounds, cross-pollinate their ideas amongst each other. And so that's what I think is actually necessary. You have to have the physical meeting space for people to interact and to access new networks as well that they might not have ordinarily had access to.
Most certainly. I think you just summed it up for us really well. And when we talked about everything from entrepreneurship to creating civic and social engagement, and all these areas and how they've come together. So certainly I've gotten a big picture. I'm hoping that our viewers will also be able to get the big picture of what this is, and truly to be able to come in, to access the space, to utilize the space, to reach out, to say help, or hey, I've got an idea. I know that these are the kind of places where an idea can really germinate and really grow. Thank you so much for your time and for
I appreciate
sharing
it.
this
Thank you.
wonderful information.